So as long as people have had goats, you know, if they have an issue with worms, they'll take them to a veterinarian and the vet will say, give them some ivermectin. And that's been going on for decades. Now, there's obviously not a lot of goat production in the United States of America, so most people, you know, like myself included, just kind of have goats for a hobby. You know, I sell some on the side, but there's not a huge, you know, drug market for goats and the issues that goats have. So ivermectin has always been the go-to wormer, and it's been used for decades, like I said, and over those decades, these goats have developed a tolerance towards it, and it does not work well at all. And in some portions of the country, you know, certain geographic regions, it doesn't work at all. It doesn't even do anything. So how that happens is, say this herd of goats right here behind me, if one of them got barber pole stomach worms, which is the main worm that I'm referring to, and then I treated it with ivermectin, some of those worms that don't fully die off and it's been exposed to that ivermectin, the goats will then poop those worms out, and then they'll go back out into the field and reproduce and all, but they'll have a slight immunity to ivermectin. Then the goats will come back, they'll eat some grass, pick up some more of those exact worms, and then, you know, it'll get sick, I'll hit it again with some more wormer, and then those worms that don't die from the ivermectin, they go back out into the field with an even bigger immunity to ivermectin. So that's been happening all across the country, different spots, different goats. You know, goats will go to a sale in the southeast and they'll end up in the Midwest, and it'll take those same barber pole stomach worms that are inside their stomach, and then they'll get out in the Midwest, they'll poop them out, and then those resistant worms are now in a whole completely different part of the country. So ivermectin really does not work, and I have tried using it when I was a novice goat owner. You know, I got my first few goats, I had one that had some issues, and I read online, you know, give it some ivermectin, and the goat really didn't improve all that much. So I had to get online, read more, and that's where I came to my method that I use now. And what I use now is Cydectin and Valbazen. Now this treatment is becoming more popular, as it should be, because it actually works for treating the barber pole stomach worm. Now there's a few different types of worms that will affect goats, but this is the main one that I've had to deal with, and the one that I've seen the most is the barber pole stomach worm. And if you have goats, know about goats, you've heard of this worm, and it can be pretty deadly. So like I said, Cydectin and Valbazen. So these are two different wormers, and they do two different things slightly different, but you give them at the same time, and there's a dosing schedule. I'll probably overlay that on a screen. I've already got a video covering that topic specifically, how to use these two wormers. So go check that video out. I'll probably link it down in the description below. But these are what I would say the new treatment for the barber pole stomach worm. So like I said, you give them both at the same time, and they attack the worms differently and will clear them up really well. I've had some of my goats in the past that have needed treatment, and I've administered the treatment. You got to follow it correctly, but I've had amazing results. Some of these goats out here have had the anemia, the bottle jaw, where they're just, you know, really close to dying, and I've brought them back to full health, and some of them are pregnant right now and gonna have babies in just a few weeks. So this treatment really works, but here's the thing. You've got to be smart with how you worm your goats. I personally do not worm a goat unless they need it. The absolute worst thing that you can do for your herd of goats is to worm them consistently without them needing it. It's basically, you know, you can make the analogy like somebody who's an alcoholic. You know, somebody that's an alcoholic can consume a lot of alcohol that to somebody who doesn't drink would probably kill them. So it's the same way with these worms. They're being exposed to it over and over, and they're building up an immunity. They're building up a tolerance to those wormers. So if you were to give your goats, say you worm them every 3 months, every quarter, say if you were to worm them every quarter without them needing this wormer, like they didn't have any symptoms, they were fine, and you gave it to them anyway, when they get sick in the future potentially, and you go to worm them, it's not going to work as effectively as if they've never been exposed and they just got a heavy worm load and they need that treatment. It would be not that effective. That's why I personally do not worm my goats unless they have like diarrhea, a bottle jaw, or some other visible symptom that tells me that they need worming. The worst thing you can do, I'll say it again, is to worm your goats consistently without them needing it. And these two wormers here are given orally. Ivermectin comes in an oral drench. It comes in an injectable form, and you know, like I said, it doesn't really work, but it does have a few uses today still, and mainly that's for like mites and skin, you know, like irritants on the goats, and that's given in an injectable dosage, I've found. So ivermectin, you know, for treating the worms, it'll kill a goat quickly. I don't use it. I haven't used it in years. I don't think it works, and I would not recommend anybody else to use it. I would recommend this treatment right here, or go online to somebody in your area, like a Facebook group or something, and see what people in your area are using. So just how the ivermectin has become less effective and almost completely ineffective in certain areas of the country, other medications and other wormers could be doing the same thing in different areas. You just have to do the homework and figure out what works best for you and your goats in your area. In my biggest word of advice is, unless it's a veterinarian that specializes in like small ruminants like goats and sheep and whatnot, be very cautious of what a local vet will tell you, because odds are they don't know a ton about goats. You know, down here in the southeastern part of the United States, every like large animal vet is just cows. They're worried about cows and maybe horses and stuff like that, because that's the big money makers for them. They treat a ton of cows, you know, thousands and thousands of cows, and they may see a goat like once a month or something. So they're not reading up on goats probably. They don't know a ton. They probably didn't take a ton of classes on goats because they knew they weren't going to see a lot of goats. So it's important to do your own research. I personally will trust some goat owner that's had goats for 30 years on a Facebook group more than I'll trust my local vets within 30 miles of me here personally. Now that's just me in my town, in my situation, but do your own research. You know, contact people in your area that have goats, that have had them for a long time, because they're gonna know what works and what doesn't work. I'm gonna do a video in the future on the best way to avoid worms altogether. But for now, just know, don't use ivermectin. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a long time. And if you want to keep your goats healthy and they have worm problems, there's better ways to do it. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll be happy to answer anything you've got. I've had goats about 6 years myself, and I've learned a ton along the way. And when I started off, I didn't know anything. So, you know, I'm making these videos to help people that, you know, are in my situation where you're starting off, you don't know a ton, but I'm hoping I can save you those mistakes that I made along the way, and you can start off way ahead of where I started off. So again, leave us any comments, questions, hit that like button, and if you want any more goat content, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video.